All right, so tonight we look at the V'Hee Sheamda, famous part of the Haggadah, turned into many songs because the words are beautiful.
Jacob's going to sing.
Jacob's going to give us a rendition. Okay, so let's read the Haggadah that leads up to the V'Hee Sheamda. So the Haggadah reads like this: Baruch Shem Avtachas Yisrael, blessed is the one who keeps his promise to the Jewish people. Baruch Hu, blessed is he, Shakadosh Baruch Hu, Chishiv etz haketz, that God calculated the end. Last is Kamasha Amal Avram Avinu B'Bris Ben Abisarim, to do that which He said He would do to Avram at the covenant. So there was a covenant that Avram made, where God tells Avram, God and Avram made a covenant, and God tells Avram, your children will be slaves, and now they're free. So blessed is He kept His promise. We were slaves and they were freed. So Shinamar, as the verse reads, V'Emer LaAvram, and God told Avram, Yoda Teda, no, you shall know, Kiger Yizaracha Baretz Le'lahem, your children will be foreigners in the land that's not theirs, Va'avadum, and they will be enslaved, V'inuoisam, and they will be persecuted, Abba Me'eshana for 400 years, V'gamas Agoya Yavdu, and the nation that will enslave them, Dononoichi, I will judge them. Va'acharakein, meaning that they will get punished. Va'acharakein, and after that, Yitzhak Baruch HaShkod will go out with great wealth. So we're just thanking Hashem for keeping His promise. He said we're going to come out, we did go out. And we got all the wealth, we got everything He promised. Then the next part we read, we raise our glass, right? The instruction there says to raise the glass of wine. And then we say, V'Hee Sheamda L'Aviseinu, and this is what stood for our fathers, V'lanu, and for us. Shaloi Echad Levad Amod Aleinu, it wasn't just one who rose up against us, L'Chaloseinu, to destroy us, not just the Egyptians, but many did. Ela Shebachol Devader, but in every generation, Amdim Aleinu, there are those who stand up against us, L'Chaloseinu, to consume us, to destroy us. V'Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the Holy One, blessed be Matzaleinu B'Yadam, saves us from their hand. So this paragraph opens up with He and this. What's this? What are we talking about? That's the big question. What are we talking about? Because the previous paragraph only talked about specifically Egypt. Right? Specifically, Hashem tells Avram that your children can be in Egypt and then be freed. So where is the this? What's the this that stood for us? What's this? The He and this. That's what it means. V'Hee Sheamda. This is what stood for us. V'Hee Sheamda L'Aviseinu. This is what stood for our fathers and us. Because not just they were persecuted, but we're persecuted. Every year, every generation, there's people who try to destroy us, and God saves us. But what's the this? What are we talking about? So there's a quasi joke that Chassidim say. When you say V'Hee Sheamda, you raise your glass, right? So we say this, the glass.
The glass is saving us.
The l'chaim, the fact that Jews can get together and celebrate. This is what stood for us.
That's awesome. That's enough for me. I'm done.
It's a good insight in and of itself, right? But obviously, I mean, the Haggadah has more to it, but it's a nice little...
I'm not sure. I think the Haggadah meant exactly that.
Exactly that. Raising the glass, and that's this, the glass. Okay. So, different levels of understanding what this means. What is this promise that we're talking about? What's the this that stood for us? So first, Mishibali Aleket, classic commentary on the Haggadah. Pirish Achi Binyamin, my brother Binyamin. I'm not sure what this stands for. Nedoi. I'm not sure what it stands for. It's a way of blessing him or honoring him. Anyway, but while he's still alive, I believe, not like of blessed memory, but anyway. So he says, "Avtachas Hagula," the promise of redemption, which God promised Abraham to at the Bris Ben Absarim at the covenant, Ben Absarim. That in other words, the covenant described in the paragraph just preceding the V'Hee Sheamda, when he told him about the exiles and the persecution, he Oisa is the very same promise which stood for our forefathers, B'Mitzrayim in Egypt, Ubebavel, and the next exile, Babylonian exile, Ubemadai, and in the Mede, like the country Mede, ancient country, that exile, Ubeyavan, and then in Greece, the Greek exile, and this is what stands for us in Rome. Rome being the final exile after being exiled at the destruction of the Second Temple, which we are still part of the Roman exile. Because at that time, God showed Avram all the exiles. So when Hashem tells Avram that your children are going to be exiled for 400 years in Egypt, it didn't just mean that land. He meant all the exiles to follow. And this indeed is what states explicitly in the Medrash. The Medrash quotes a verse And the verse says, "V'hinei ema chashecha gedola nefelas alav," and behold, an awesome darkness that is great shall fall upon them. And the Medrash comments, "Ema, awesome, zu Bavel." This refers to the exile of Bavel. Chashecha, dark, zu Madai, gedola, great, zu Yavan. This is Greece. Nefelas alav, falls upon them. Zu Edom. This refers to Edom. So in the verse, or in the verses, so when God tells Avraham about the exile from Egypt, it's all the exiles to follow. Just like he showed him these persecution, he also showed him about the redemptions of each of these exiles. As explained earlier. And then we'll also leave then with great wealth. That's why we're saying this. Not just once rose up against us to destroy us, meaning to say, it wasn't just the Egyptians who got up to do us harm. In every generation they get up to do us harm and to destroy us. And the reason why they have the ability to do that is because of that initial edict or decree, which God commanded or God decreed at that original time. So in other words, in Avraham, when God told Abraham that your children are going to be slaves in a land that's not theirs, it was literally talking about Egypt, but also included in that all the following exiles, and therefore all the following redemptions. So on the simple level, it's the same promise that led them out of Egypt then. It's the same promise that says we're going to be here now, and we'll be future redeemed. And that's why we consider this paragraph. And God says this as He told us. Simple reading. Okay, a little deeper. The Or Yeshardim. Okay, so he begins with the commentary from Rashi, which I believe was very similar to what we just read. And then he writes as follows: if it weren't for that interpretation, it would seem to me to explain in the following fashion.
Sorry, I'm just going to try to get away from the phone.
They call it sorry.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
So, the Or Yeshardim says like this. Here's how I would have interpreted it if we're not going to go with that literal interpretation. Shakol Ummah, every nation, She'inu es Yisrael, which persecuted these people. It's the right margin there on the top. It's a little bit fuzzy to lettering, but Lo Haya Inu Levatach Lisatzona. Any nation that got up to persecute the Jews, persecution was not their end goal. Ach Magmasam, their ultimate goal, Sheyaschilu Be'inu, that they should begin with persecution, V'Yisaimu B'Kliya, and they should conclude with extermination. Every nation that ever got up to persecute Jewish people, they didn't just want persecution. They wanted extermination. But you don't jump straight to the end. You gotta start slow. Recognize that pattern? It starts off with persecution, but then it always ends, at least in their hope, whether they're articulating or not, but they always want extermination. Amnam, however, hu yisbarach, he may be blessed. Hiftichanu, promised us, quote from the verse, Ma'astim, you will not be disgusting enough, Lega'altim, and I will not, you won't get so bad, L'chalaisim, to the point that I will want to destroy. This is in the curses, right? In the Torah, when the Jews are told the curses that will happen if they don't listen to Hashem's Torah, and it goes on and on and on. And then it says, however, you will never go so bad that I will want to absolutely exterminate you. This is what Hashem promises. So, kila, that extermination, lo yasaban, will never happen to us. And their intention of extermination will never happen. And this promise that we may be persecuted, but we will certainly not be exterminated, Nichlala is incorporated by Maris Baruch and God may be blessed words. Lavram Tavram. Kigeri is Rachaberetz Lelahem. When Hashem tells Avraham that the Jewish people are going to be enslaved, and they'll be persecuted and enslaved. But in that promise, in other words, it's not just the promise of, this is the interesting thing, it's not just the promise of redemption. Sorry? Huh? It's not just the promise of redemption that Hashem tells Avraham, but actually in the promise of enslavement. The way in which Hashem promises and says there's going to be enslavement is that they will enslave you and they will persecute you, but they will never exterminate you. And that is what kept us. Not just the promise of redemption, but the promise of the way in which the exile will be. Following? Never mind the theology of it, the text of it, reading the text. How he's reading the text so beautifully. When Hashem promises how the exile is going to be, He describes that they'll be in a nation that's not theirs, they'll be persecuted and they'll be enslaved. But that's the farthest it'll ever go. And that's why we're still here. Even though now we're in exile, and we're not redeemed yet. In other words, in the literal interpretation, it was the promise for redemption then is the same promise for redemption now, because in that promise for redemption included all the other future exiles. What he's saying is the very promise for exile had a definition. Namely, you will only be persecuted, but it's never going to get further than that. Extermination, as much as they will want to, it won't happen. And that's why we're still here in exile. Understand that? We're still here. They didn't exterminate us as much as they want to. So la noisam to persecute, not to be exterminated. V'zeu omer, and this is what the Haggadah means when it says V'Hee Sheamda that this promise, the way in which Hashem said there's going to be persecution, is what stood for us, for our forefathers, and for us, for not only one that stood up against us, to exterminate us. And then we say that Hashem saved us from their hands, not just that He saved us from their hands in the end by an exile, but through an exodus, through a redemption. But even in the exile, He saved us from their ultimate plan of extermination. Following? It's an interesting line. Not that it's okay, but the point being that as far as we're going to go in exile, but the fact that we're still alive in exile is because as bad as exile gets, there's a line that as much as they want to take it to the next level, it won't happen. And that's why we're still here. Hashem won't let it happen. And that's why we're here. Not just because of the future redemption as in the first literal interpretation. You see the difference here? Keep the theology aside for a moment. Just the reading of the Haggadah. On a theological sense.
But you know what? Really, you're lucky I didn't put a gun through your head.
We talked about that in one of the previous classes, about the ultimate getting the Torah only happened because they went through Egypt, and that's just the way.
Very beautiful. When we think of what happened during so many periods in history.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are the only people in the world who survived everything.
Yeah, and that's what the Haggadah is saying.
There's no ancient people who have survived in their land, and recognizing that we have our traditions, our religion, our beliefs, our culture that has kept us together. That's the key.
Okay, fine.
And that's what he's saying here. Never mind the redemption that follows, but in the very exile there's a survival.
We have to be so careful.
Yeah.
God forbid we said this to a Holocaust survivor.
You have to know who you're talking. Yeah, 100%.
That we have to be so sensitive.
100%.
To their pain when this is said in that way.
100%.
You know, every time when I go through this part, I always make sure to ensure that we think of Ani Ma'amin.
Yeah.
And that the Yidden Tanz, as you said the other day, you remember? We were talking about the victors and the victims.
Yeah.
Who are the victims? Who are the victors?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Okay. Now we have Sfas Emes. I think we had a quote from him before in one of the previous classes. Sfas Emes readings of V'Hee Sheamda. So he says V'Hee Sheamda, he quotes the section like, and he writes, Ein movement is not understood. V'Hee al Makoi. What is the word and this referring to? What is this? Right? So we already saw two interpretations. One in that the Medrash says that included in God's promise to Avram is all the future exiles and redemptions. And then we had the Or Yesharim, which translated that this means the way in which Hashem described exile shall be will never lead to extermination as much as they would like to. Yeah?
So again, this is?
The first two readings?
Yeah.
The first reading is this, the promise we just described in the previous paragraph, where God tells Avram they're going to be enslaved and then going to be redeemed. That includes all the future exiles and redemptions. Reading number 1. Reading number 2 is this, the way in which Hashem told Avraham we're going to be in exile and that we will be persecuted. That's what kept us, because it stops at persecution. So much as they would like to exterminate, it doesn't ever get there. That's the second interpretation. Now we have a third interpretation, Sfas Emes. The Yishleimar might suggest the Kol Yalamata, that the word V'Hee and this is not referring to the preceding paragraph, but rather to that which follows. Shehi Amdalanu, that the following is what stood for us. What's the following? Mashaloi Echel Bovad Amad, in the fact that it wasn't only one who decided to get up against us. Meaning, what does it mean by that? Klaimer means to say, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Asim Manu Chesed. God did for us the following kindness. Bezeh, in the fact, Shechilek es kol koiches sitra achra, that he divided the powers of those who would oppose us. Shaloyia nimtze b'ma'achdos, that they should not have unity. The biggest blessing, that our enemies hate each other more than they hate us, or at least sometimes. So now you get to the Haggadah, when the Haggadah says, in this fast Emes is reading, V'Hee Sheamda, this is what stood for our fathers, v'lanu and us, that it was never one unified voice that got up against us, to destroy us. Rather, all those people who want to destroy us don't come together as one, but they're scattered throughout generations. And thus, they're not successful, because they don't have that unity. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting. And similar to that which it says, the verse reads that we are the smallest amongst people, or the fewest among people. The Kosvu Chazan, our sages write in the Medrash, we are smaller than all the nations if you're to combine them. But against each individual nation, the Jewish people are, literally means are more in number, but also more in that we are more powerful. And the fact that God made it that the Jews are together, and the separation He caused to those who are to the wicked, to those who are against us, and the fact that He scattered them throughout generations as opposed to unifying them as one, that's what kept us going. Another interesting read. And that our enemies don't have the unity to get it done. Okay. Now, finally, we get to the Kabbalistic / Hasidic reading.
So this is their disunity?
That's correct. It's the following line, that it's not only one. So, in other words, the literal reading of the Haggadah is, it's not only one, but there's a bunch. What he's saying is, it's not. They don't all come as one. It's not only one. Shaloi echad bavad. They don't come as one alone to get destroyed, but rather scattered throughout generations, or even scattered amongst each other. So it's the unity they lack. It's the loy echad. The fact that they're not one is that stands for us, and that's the V'Hee. This is the line that follows. Now we get to Kabbalah / Chassidus. Okay, I quoted on top there the paragraph in Kabbalah. I can go through the translation. Okay, we'll leave that alone for a moment. Just get to the next paragraph where the Rebbe interprets that passage in the Kabbalah. It's Kabbalistic language for what's about to be said. So the Rebbe writes like this, quoting from the Kabbalistic book that which it's on top there. Ubesifri Kabbalah, in the books of Kabbalah, Mavur is explained. Shehi, that the word he, Koyi al Sfiras HaMalchus, represents the attribute of Malchus. What is Malchus? Very briefly, there are 10 divine attributes. Generally speaking, they divide into two: intellect and emotion. Right? They parallel the human experience. The Pasuk says, "From my flesh I see God," and so this explains at length. A person analyzes one's own personal experience, and that reflects God's experience. And the reason for that is because our souls, we are made in God's image, right? So our souls reflect this divine system. So the same way we have intellect and emotion, the divine system also has what's known as intellect and emotion. Those are the divine attributes. But just like intellect and emotion are internal, they don't interface with the world outside unless it goes through communication. Right? It's communication, otherwise it stays inside of me. So likewise, creation also, there's a divine system, but then it has to project. That power of projection is known in Kabbalah as Malchus, kingship. Why kingship? Because kingship doesn't tell you about the personality of the king, other than he rules over people. So the attribute of kingship doesn't have any description in terms of its personality. It doesn't. You say someone's a king, it doesn't tell you if he's a nice king, if he's a mean king, strict warrior. Doesn't say anything. It just tells you. The only thing it tells you is that he has the capacity to project his will over people. Now the question is, what's going on inside, and that's what projects. So kingship, Malchus, is projection. Now why does the word he represent Malchus? Because he is the feminine. He as opposed to who. The word he is in feminine. Now in Kabbalah, the feminine is this ability to project. Why is that? the way in which male and female interact physically in producing a child. The male produces the seed. The woman is the recipient of their seed, takes it, and from there comes a child. So likewise, Malchus doesn't have on its own the ability to create what follows. It takes what the preceding attributes have and projects that into creation. Following? So if using the language we used before, intelligence and emotions, all those things, the projective ability, Malchus, doesn't have anything on its own. It takes from the preceding spheres and then projects it into the world, whether it's judgment, kindness, whatever it happens to be. Okay? So, therefore the word he, which is in feminine, is Malchus. This is briefly what it said in the previous paragraph, although it's much more cryptic there. Now this Malchus, the Rabbi says, is koyach hamunah, the power of faith. Why is the feminine faith? For the same reason. Because when one has faith, or the experience of faith is not one where I am understand or develop. On the contrary, I'm a recipient. I put myself aside and I say, what do you God have to say? That's what faith is. So faith is like Malchus, like the feminine, a recipient, which is a big theme of the night. Matzah's flat. No ego. Even in Kabbalah, your matzah is supposed to be a little round, to be a recipient. It's the idea. So the word he is feminine, Malchus / faith, in which the Jew is a recipient of divine truth, whatever it is. I have faith in you. Not me figuring it out. I have faith in you. Okay. Then he continues. Okay, so now, if that's the translation, then the Haggadah means V'Hee, and this faith is what stood for us and our forefathers. If the word he means faith, Malchus / faith, then the Haggadah reads, and faith is what stood for us. Take the word he out and put the word faith inside. Then you have, and faith is what stood for us and our forefathers. Now let's see. See clearly, the Rabbi writes, Shamuna, that the faith, he sha'amda lanu, that's what stood for us, b'chol davar in every generation. Shebnei Yisrael, Jewish people, amdu, withstood b'chol hanisionis, every test, v'nishiru shleimim, and remained true to themselves. Jews have done this throughout the generations. Remain true to their Judaism and true to Torah and true to God. Shezeu ach v'rach, this is only mitzad koyach ha'amunah, because of pure faith, v'mesiras nefesh, and because of that faith, they were willing to give up everything for that truth. Not because they were intelligent, not because they were smart, not because they were big scholars, but because they had faith. So Amunah, V'Hee, this faith, that's what stood for us. That's why we're still here as Jews. Even people who are greatly intellectual also withstood tests. And because the challenge for each person is individualized to what they can deal, the challenge for those who are intellectual, that their intelligence remain complete, is not with respect to intelligence. I'm translating a little bit, I'll explain in a moment. Other things. If so, but they're saying like this, that someone who was a scholar, so when they were challenged in throughout history for their Judaism, it wasn't a test to their scholarship. That wasn't was that test. That's not the thing that was being challenged. Their scholarship. What was being challenged is their commitment deeper than their scholarship. They're already reached their scholarship. They're already scholars. So, not only did the simpletons who withstood the test that stuck to it because of faith, but even the scholars who had to face the test also withstood it, not because of their scholarship, but because of their faith. Because their scholarships were not being a test. We're not being put at the stake. Their faith was being put to the test, not their scholarship. So even the biggest of scholars, they're withstanding and they're sticking to who they are, even in the face of the greatest persecution, was not because of their scholarship, because of their faith, like every other Jew who did it. And therefore, this faith is what stood for us. One level of this Kabbalistic reading, and that the faith stood for us, because those who have faith, us Jews who had faith, were able to survive all this stuff and remain true to who we are. Now another level. The Maggid writes, it's a famous teaching, the Mishnah says, Da ma l'mayla mimach, know that which is above you. So the literal meaning of the Mishnah is the Mishnah of us in Ethics of Our Fathers. The literal meaning of the Mishnah is, know that which is above you, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all your deeds are being written in a book. So the literal reading of the Mishnah is, you should know what's above you and you won't do a sin. Right? Know God's watching you. Incidentally, today with modern technology, it's not crazy to imagine an actual entity that hears, sees, and records everything you do. Alexa. It's not crazy. It's not something out of the pale of imagination. But at any rate, that's not what Jews are talking about. We're talking about Hashem, but it's just technology gives you a better way of being able to visualize it. At any rate. So the Maggid reads this Mishnah, a little tweak it, a little, like, it's not literal reading, but it's a little Kabbalistic reading. Da, no. Mala, mala, that which happens above, mimcha is from you. Meaning to say. Right, the Gemara, the famous Gemara, which says, Midash adam moeded bo moeded unloi. The way in which man interacts is the way he's interacted with from heaven. So in other words, it's measure for measure. But the Maggid is saying even more. It's the deeper reason for why things are measure for measure is not tit for tat, but rather because spiritual realities are created by the Jew. The Jew who has free choice and has within him a Jewish soul has the capacity to create spiritual realities. You may have heard this idea that when you make a bracha, you create an angel. Right? You may have heard this idea. The language is not important, but the idea that our actions don't have this effect in the little world we live in here. But because we have a godly soul, our actions have cosmic effect and create spiritual realities. As he says, Pirush, you should know, da, no, kol mashal ma'ala, everything that happens above, hakol everything's from you. This is from the Maggid of Mezrich, the Baal Shem Tov's successor. If that's the case, so the faith that the Jew has that Hashem is going to make us survive, or Hashem is going to redeem us, that creates the reality of that redemption. So it's a circle. The reason why we survive in exile is because we have that faith. And then that faith ultimately is what creates the reality for redemption, because we have that faith in the redemption. So the V'Hee Sheamda, this emunah that stood for us, is twofold. It stood for us in exile, and it's what's standing for us to bring to the redemption. Right? The Haggadah has two things, kind of combining the Or Yesharim and the previous two ones. Right? The one before talked about how the Or Yesharim wrote about how in exile we'll never get to extermination because Hashem promises that never get that far. That's like the faith which keeps us going in our exile, because we have faith. We stick to our guns even when we're persecuted. And then the second half, it also serves as the prelude to redemption, because the reality of redemption is created by the Jew's faith. So the Jew's faith serves both to keep him surviving while he's in exile and ultimately create that reality of redemption. So here you have, 4 layers of understanding what this is. Literal reading, that talk about the preceding paragraph. Hashem promised Avram that we're going to go to exile and be redeemed. That includes all future exiles. Number 2, when Hashem promised that we're going to go to exile, it was that we will be persecuted, but never going to get to persecution, and that's why we survived in our exile. Number 3, from the Tzfas Emes, was that the fact that they're not all coming as one; they're scattered. And number 4 is that our faith is what kept us going. Number 1, in our exile. That's why we survived as Jews, because we had that deep faith and stuck to our guns super rationally. And then that faith is what will create the final reality of redemption, maybe speedily in our days.